Welcome to the video, guys. It would seem the government is starting to remember that it has an 80-seat majority, at least in some regards. It's clear for anyone to see that in the majority of cases, the government is bowing to media pressure, constantly worried about what the media are going to say, despite having, as I said, an 80-seat majority. This is clear and obvious for anyone to see in the way they've pussyfooted around every single issue. But when it comes to the civil service, it seems they might actually be doing what they are saying, though I expect this has come from Dominic Cummings and not actually from Boris Johnson or the Tory party. Well, as some of you might know already, Cabinet Secretary Mark Sedwell has actually planned to step down. Now, this hasn't happened instantly, he is going to leave in September, but it is a sign that Boris Johnson's plan to drain the civil service swamp is actually being put in motion. Now, this is, as I've said, more than likely Dominic Cummings' plan, but Boris Johnson is backing it. We have seen a few MPs, including Michael Gove and Priti Patel, come out saying this was going to happen soon, with one of them even saying it's going to be hard rain if memory serves. Now, naturally, the Ramonas, Labour, Lib Dems and the rest of them are all screaming from the rooftops because of this, which I'm sure you would agree makes it all the more sweeter. Now, The Guardian are running articles on this with the headline, "Relationship between Number 10 and Mark Sedwell was no longer tenable." Let's be honest, it was no longer tenable anyway. He had already made his stance clear in regards to Brexit with the article he released last year. So, to be honest, I'm kind of pissed off that it actually took this long for him to go. As you might remember, he pushed Project Fear around a no-deal Brexit. While Mark Sedwell may have been Theresa May's first and only choice for the head of the civil service for his star quality and decades of experience, the so-called securocrat failed to hit the mark with Boris Johnson. Rumours of rifts between him and senior Number 10 staff over the handling of coronavirus have dogged Westminster for weeks, with accusations he has not taken command. Although, in reality, Sedwell may never have quite recovered from his public warning that a no-deal Brexit would be a dire outcome for the UK, which is what I alluded to earlier. His position realistically had been untenable since then. That is a political stance. I don't care what anyone says. With some of Johnson's most senior allies from the Vote Leave camp running Downing Street, it is likely he was viewed as a Remainer at heart with the potential to obstruct the Prime Minister's path. Which, it's not really the Prime Minister's path, it's the path of this country. The people voted him in. He is just a head figure of that at the end of the day. It's the people's path. Brexit is the people's path. It's not Boris Johnson's, it's not the Conservatives or anyone else. And yes, many people thought he would obstruct that path if he was allowed to remain. As I said, he should have been gone long ago. The wording of his resignation letter to Boris Johnson, that we have agreed I will stand down, speaks volumes of a dysfunctional relationship that was no longer tenable. No, that tells you that Boris Johnson and his team are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, taking a hardline stance against the civil service and saying, look, you can either go and leave with some dignity or we will just sack your ass and that will be that. 80-seat majority, there is nothing anyone can do about it. Which, as I said, is actually good news, but doesn't make up for all the other things the Tory party has done by cowing to the media. Luckily, they haven't yet bent the knee, but I wouldn't put it past them. Let's hope they never do. Johnson's chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, is also well known to harbour less than complimentary views on Whitehall mandarins, preferring the talents of scientists, data analysts and physicists rather than civil service lifers. Well, let's be honest, over the last 4 years and even before that, the civil service has kind of shown this country exactly what they are. How many things have they covered up and hidden from public view, much like the grooming gang report we are trying to get released at the moment. Cummings is reported to have warned just last week that a hard rain would soon fall on the civil service. If this move has been prompted by Cummings, then it does much to re-establish his power base within Downing Street after it briefly looked on shaky ground when he incensed the nation by travelling to County Durham during lockdown. No, it only incensed the left-wing media, the rest of the country didn't really care. It was a storm in the teacup at the end of the day, which has now been completely forgotten about, except for from these left-wing shitweasels that we see here. The scene was also set for impending change within Whitehall when Senior Cabinet Minister Michael Gove said in a speech on Saturday he attacked groupthink within the civil service, which I'm sure you would agree he needs to attack groupthink within more than just the civil service, as does the entire government. There is no doubt that Sedwell wielded significant control, Not only was he Cabinet Secretary, but he also occupied the role of National Security Advisor, an unusual arrangement that May preferred, but which some felt did not provide enough variety of opinion at the very top of government. Wherever Johnson turned, he would have been within his orbit of decision making, which is why it had to change. And to me, it just shows how disingenuous treasonous May was. She wanted someone that would echo her groupthink. You have to remember, she used to be neck deep with the civil service in previous roles. The fact the national security post has been immediately filled by David Frost, Johnson's Brexit aide and a political appointment who is not a member of the civil service, shows that the Prime Minister perhaps feels more comfortable with a true Brexiteer providing support on global relations and security. Well, there is also an upside to that, even for the Remainers. This, being a political appointment as they call it, means if he fucks up, it's obviously on Boris Johnson's head. Though, given David Frost seems to be doing a fairly decent job with the Brexit negotiations, I don't think Boris Johnson needs to worry about him too much. Sedwell was born and grew up in Lincolnshire, like anyone actually gives a fuck. After joining the Foreign Office in 1989, he had postings in Afghanistan, Egypt, Iraq and Pakistan, with a CV suggesting connections with MI5 and MI6. Sedwell has been portrayed as a spook, happier in the company of spies and soldiers, rather than those who want to wield a political axe. Well, I would have to disagree with that, considering how chummy he was with treasonous May, as this article pointed out earlier. With the current occupant of Downing Street and Cummings both being uniquely fearless in proposing radical changes to Whitehall, and with the overreaching principle of this government still being getting Brexit done, Sedwell's presence has ultimately proved incompatible. Well, that was obvious. Anyone with half a brain cell could have told you that before. Now, The Guardian carried on in another article attacking obviously the appointment of David Frost, the Brexiteer. The appointment of Mr. Frost will also cause controversy, especially among security officials who may well question why a special advisor with no experience of national security has been appointed to the crucial role usually reserved for experienced hands with MI5 and MI6. Known as Frosty among Johnson's inner circle of advisors, he will also receive a peerage. It was announced on Sunday. I don't agree with the peerage there, that is for sure. Lord Ricketts, a former national security advisor, said that Frost's apparent political appointment will radically change a role usually occupied by civil servants. Well, the people of this country have a massive problem with the civil servants, so changing the role and making it into something that is political at least gives some accountability to the civil service, because, like I said, a political role comes down to Boris Johnson at the end of the day. That completely changes the nature of the role. No longer a politically neutral civil servant giving dispassionate advice. Well, Mark Sedwell wasn't that, as we already know. This is part of the reason why Boris Johnson got rid of him. Plus, he is made a peer, so we will be a minister accountable to Parliament, he wrote on Twitter. Sedwell's exit from Number 10 is likely to be part of a wider shake-up of top jobs across the civil service overseen by Cummings and Gove. Yes, because they are going to drain the fucking swamp, which is what we want. Obviously, we know Sir Philip Ratnam is suing the civil service. We don't care about that. We've dealt with that before. And as the previous article alluded to there, we have Remainers from the opposition parties screaming from the rooftops. This is going to be some great salt mining when he actually goes and is replaced with hopefully a Brexiteer. Because David Frost is only taking the National Security Advisor's role, the Cabinet Secretary position is still up for grabs. Opposition MPs pointed the finger at the Prime Minister's chief aide, Dominic Cummings. What a surprise to absolutely no one, suggesting he played a role in the former Afghanistan ambassador being forced out as head of the civil service. Opposition MPs have accused Dominic Cummings of playing a role in Sir Mark Sedwell's exit. Mr. Cummings is rumoured to have a difficult relationship with Sir Mark, who was appointed Cabinet Secretary in 2018 by Theresa May. Labour's Shadow Housing Secretary Fangham Debonair, referencing reports of a shake-up of the civil service, said on BBC Radio 4's Westminster Hour, "Why have Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson decided that now is the time for hard rain to fall on our loyal civil servants? Yeah, they might be loyal to you and the things you do, but they are not loyal to the people of this country, which is why Boris Johnson has decided to get rid of it. I expect if the coronavirus wouldn't have cropped up, he probably would have got rid of them in around February or March." Acting leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, said, Boris Johnson is clearly ready to grant Cummings his every wish when it comes to politicising the civil service and sweeping out those who may try to hold his government to account. Oh, that's different to what I thought the civil service was there for. I thought they were there to help the government in doing what the people wanted, not holding them to account. I always assumed that was Labour's job. It is what they claim to do after all, though they don't do a very good job of it because they're piss-poor anti-British fuckpigs. The Prime Minister made quick work in promoting his Europe advisor, David Frost, to the role of National Security Advisor, which, I've got to say, that picture of him smiling like that is fucking awesome and going to trigger a fair few people, that is for sure. Sir Mark's exit follows on from a number of changes at the top of the civil service in recent months. The Foreign Office's most senior civil servant, Sir Simon MacDonald, seen as a Brexit critic, was told this month he had to step down before it was merged with the Department for International Development. And we already know about Sir Philip Rutman. This would appear to be Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson draining the swamp of these Ramonin tosspots. This I am actually happy with. As I've said, in recent times, Boris Johnson and his government are not really acting like they have an 80-seat majority and are cowing to possible media pressure, doing their absolute best to make sure the media can't come after them for anything when it doesn't really matter what the media say. At the end of the day, they have an 80-seat majority. The people of this country spoke and told them to do what we want, not cow to left-wing losers and the media. Now, once again, I'm going to plug my Parler account. If you haven't already joined up, then be sure to do so. The link will be in the description. But as always, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who supports the channel, and my other social media links are down in the video description if you want to come and support me on Twitter, BitChute, and a variety of other platforms, including my second YouTube channel. As I said, all links are down in the video description.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.